Welcome to another episode of Chatting with the Experts, where I, Paula Kone, speak with fabulous women from Africa, from the Caribbean, and in the diaspora. These women share my mission, which is to educate, empower, and encourage women globally. And they are, my interviewees, are professionals and or successful entrepreneurs. The topic today is thriving at the top. And in this episode, we're going to explore how women can shift from representation to influence while embracing practices that sustain purpose, presence, and long-term impact at the top. My guest who's going to be joining me in a few minutes is a seasoned business and HR executive with over 2 decades of experience across global corporations and high growth startups. She has held senior leadership roles at world-class organizations, including Johnson & Johnson, GE, and Bank of America. And currently, she serves as the Vice President of Human Resources. With that, I want to welcome Maureen Aryee to Chatting with the Experts. Hello, Maureen.
Hello, Paula.
I hope I got your name right.
You
Aryee.
did, you absolutely did. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying yes. I don't take it for granted when anybody comes onto the show because they're sharing my mission, which is, as I said earlier on, to educate, encourage, and empower women globally. So I gave just a snippet of your very impressive bio. Let's expand on it because I know, of course, you've had a remarkably diverse career. And so tell us a little bit about how you walked through this journey and what really guided you to do this.
Absolutely, absolutely. My career has been intentionally nonlinear. I began my career in the space of IT right out of undergrad and joined GE, as you mentioned earlier. After a few years there, I decided to explore some other paths and got into financial services and eventually decided to launch my own business in the real estate industry. And so I did that for several years, but really felt like I still wasn't quite there in terms of my purpose, in terms of what I wanted to dedicate myself to. And so I returned to school and pursued an MBA. And out of that MBA, got recruited by Johnson & Johnson and ended up spending 10 years with them. And it was a great opportunity to really launch into the field of HR and really grow my experience in that field and launch myself, quite honestly, into a number of senior leadership and global roles with that company. And after 10 years with them, I decided to do yet another pivot and take those experiences into the biotech startup world where I am now. And this was really a decision I made to have my imprint on an organization that is being built from the ground up, to be able to really shape culture, build leaders, and influence what that looks like at the start of an organization. And so that is how I've dedicated the last several years of my career. And there's been some really unique lessons I would say that I've learned pivoting throughout these companies and growing into various roles. And one thing, if I can share, is I've come to realize that it's not really just about talent. Talent is key, talent is what gets your foot in the door, but there is quite a bit of capacity that's required to navigate the turbulent seasons that organizations go through. There's stamina that's required to really influence at senior leadership roles. And then there's also purpose. There's a real place for knowing your purpose and having that guide the decisions that you make into various roles and into various chapters of life. And so that I would say is a very high level overview of the journey that I've been on that brings me here today.
Wow. You say I'm speechless because I'm so impressed, and something that jumped out at me was purpose because you mentioned that after your undergraduate, you actually had opened a business. You for some time, and then you felt this is not quite it. I'm not quite fulfilling my purpose. And that's why you went back to do your MBA and ultimately ended up at GE for 10 G, right?
J&J, J&J.
J&J for 10 years. So that purpose comes with a lot of responsibility and a lot of emotions. And, especially when it comes to leadership. And when we talked some time ago, you talked about emotional capacity
Hmm.
and how that is helpful for enabling leaders to stay at the top.
That's right.
Can you elaborate on that? Because especially as I know you've had experience with startups and leadership, well, they go hand in hand, but you really need to have that leadership anchored. So can you talk
That's
a bit
right.
about that?
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, emotional capacity I found has become one of my favorite topics because I encounter it on a daily basis where it exists, where it does not exist. And maybe I should define it for you. It's really the ability to stay grounded and clear and effective under pressure. It's that
Mhm.
internal strength that really guides your judgment, but it's also that internal strength that enables you to show up present and calm in your presence. And it's really what enables a leader to be relentless in the face of intensity when the stakes are high. I find that emotional capacity is what makes a huge difference between leaders that can mobilize teams and organizations behind them after a specific direction or course because of the presence that they carry themselves. And so that, it's a long definition, but I think you get the essence of it. I talk about it a lot because I've come to discover that organizations, again, go through lots of turbulent seasons. An example that I love to give that most individuals that have worked in the corporate environment have faced before is that of reorganizations. A lot of organizations go through reorgs, restructures, transformations, what have you. And in those moments, there's usually quite a bit of anxiety all around. Employees, excuse me, may face anxiety around, will I have a job? Do I have a future with this organization? Leaders are concerned about morale. They're concerned about productivity. Even high performing employees are concerned around whether they've got a future with the organization or not. And so, all around, there tends to be high intensity. But in my years of experience, what I've come to realize is that as a leader, my emotional stability is what the organization is, what my team feeds off of. And the clarity of mind and presence I have is just as important as the decisions I make in those moments because leaders set the emotional temperature of an organization. And those that have built the muscle of exercising and demonstrating strong emotional capacity, again, are able to stabilize organizations in chaotic seasons and are able to move them towards fulfilling a specific direction. And so I think it's one of those that no matter which part of the organization you look in terms of leadership levels, you tend to see gaps, even very senior leaders that are, so to speak, at the top of their game, you oftentimes see gaps, and the ability to close that gap really determines how effective a leader can be.
Thanks for explaining that. But then, where does emotional intelligence that we hear so much about these days, where does that come into play with emotional capacity? Is it like a subset? Because you talked about reorganization, and we are living in a time of reorganization. We are hearing it, we are feeling it. Some of us have been impacted directly with it.
That's right.
So,
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And the two are interrelated. Although in my mind, I look at emotional intelligence speaking more to your ability to read a room, your ability to know when to pivot, your ability to know how to manage relationships,
mhm,
how to respond in certain circumstances. And some of those are also at play when it comes to emotional capacity. But emotional capacity really, if you think about a tank being full, there are certain things that contribute to one's emotional tank being full. And for one individual, when that emotional tank is full, it spills over. For another, when that emotional tank is full, there's the ability to keep it from spilling over, if I can use that analogy. And
Yes.
so the intense pressures of a moment can either bring out strength, bring out clarity, bring out good judgment, bring out good direction in a leader, or it can break an individual down. It's really how you respond is the difference between the emotional intelligence and the emotional capacity. An individual that does not have emotional capacity tends to break down. You hear a lot about burnout. Yes, burnout can be contributed based off of, workload and lifestyles, etc. But I also believe that emotional capacity enables individuals to manage certain pressures so that there is less burnout. I often see emotional capacity playing out when individuals are having to respond to situations where the stakes are really high and are falling under the pressure. And so hopefully that kind of helps. But the two, I would say, are not the same, but definitely do overlap in certain areas.
I see that. I understand that now. So, because we're talking about leaders and organizations and emotional capacity, then being able to either, and I'm looking at my notes, break under pressure or be able to, keep things under the wrap.
That's right.
For leaders that have worked really hard to get to the top,
Hmm.
and they get there and it seems like they're no longer successful. How would you handle that? What makes the difference? Because there's some people who are continuously finding there's no ceiling for them, in other words. They
Right.
climb and then they see something and they keep climbing. And then there are others who've always had like a goal and they get there and then there's like the burnout comes then because like there's nothing else.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, in my role as an HR leader, we are often placing specific individuals that have had a history of success, of accomplishments. We're placing those individuals in critical roles because of their past accomplishments, with the
Mhm.
expectation that they will deliver similarly in these critical roles. And I've found that sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And one of the
Mhm.
reasons is exactly what you just mentioned is when we are seeking to achieve a certain level of success and a certain height, there is a specific drive, there is the hunger, there is the ambition. Unfortunately, though, when some individuals reach that height, that hunger is no longer as intense as it used to be. That drive is no longer as intense as it used to be. There's this sense of I have attained, right? And
Mhm.
unfortunately, when those individuals with that mindset tend to stop growing, the key and the difference that you're pointing out between those that continue to identify new opportunities and continue to innovate and grow and move from one opportunity to the other is that they're seeking for it. There's still a desire. They are individuals that are lifelong learners that want to continue to evolve themselves as individuals to grow, to learn, to influence, to make impact versus those that rest on their laurels and really believe that their experiences speak for themselves. Those experiences may open certain doors, but again, to continue to make long lasting impact and to continue to have a reputation of being a successful leader, that drive needs to continue to be there, and the intentionality behind growing oneself needs to be there. I often compare the leadership journey to mountain climbing, right? I'm sure you've heard that before. It's initially you are building muscle, you are on difficult terrain, you are learning discipline, you are demonstrating capacity, demonstrating ability. You're on that first, what I would call that first stage of that leadership rise. But then you get to that second stage and sort of you reach in that summit as
You're right.
a mountain climber may. And
Hmm.
but if you think about it, when you reach that summit, the air is often thinner. You
Yeah,
know,
I love it.
the environment is very different, right? Any slight misstep could be dangerous. The implications are bigger. It's the same with leadership. The exposure is greater as you've reached a certain height, and the turbulence can be felt because, as the saying goes, the buck stops with you as the leader. And what you do there really determines the implications to a larger group of individuals, to an organization, or to a team. And so it's really important for an individual to really master not just climbing and ascending, but sustaining that success once you do get there. And some of the key things are exactly what we've spoken about, which is the emotion, building that emotional capacity, but also sustaining that drive and caring about the outcomes. When you're concerned about the outcomes that you want to deliver, you will be concerned about building whatever capacity is required to be able to deliver those results.
Yes, you really did a good job of summarizing that, but at the same time, making it so crystal clear. Because especially as we talk in 2025, I mean, we are hearing so much about, we can call it reorganization of organizations. Mhm. Another way is, what's it called? Trimming organizations down to size. But there's that
Re-engineering. That's
re-engineering.
another
Yeah.
one, yes.
But there's an underlying thing that it's like the elephant in the room. It's like, well, is AI or will AI be
Mhm.
responsible for all of these decisions being made? And how can we adapt to this new technology that's here and it's here to stay,
Mhm.
you know, while still keeping up morale and letting people
Right.
know that they are still important?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I love that you go there because, it's directly connected to the point I raised earlier around, will you keep evolving yourself as a leader? Will you keep learning
Mhm.
and growing? And one of those areas is in the space of technology. It can be in the space of, your emotional strength, but also in very tangible ways, such as in the area of technology and now in the era of AI. We as leaders talk about it all the time in terms of how do we leverage AI? How do we not get left behind? How do we ensure that it is a part and parcel of how we operate on an everyday basis? And so for me and my team, for example, we have done analysis of all the different areas in which AI can improve our productivity, can improve our efficiency, can improve the work we do. And thankfully, it is applicable in every sphere, in every function, in every role that an individual can be in. I do think that the key, though, is to really identify how each individual can actually upskill themselves in the space of AI. And so, if you're in HR, as I am in, well, what does that mean for the future of HR? What does that mean for the future of HR? And in addition to efficiencies and in addition to productivity, there's also the space of ethical use of AI. You brought it up in relation to decision making. I lead an HR team, and when it comes to talent acquisition, for example, we see a lot of technology emerging that is related to the selection and assessment of talent. But it is one of those areas where decision making cannot be left solely to technology, where it is absolutely critical that, human intervention, human interpretation, human involvement is involved to understand and to ensure that the right decisions are being made. Because, quite honestly, humans build the algorithms and the prompts behind AI and other technology. Therefore, biases can still be built in. And so that's where, for us as leaders, it's critical that we are understanding where the effectiveness can be leveraged and where a line must be drawn so that other disadvantages are not inherently built into the process because certain decision making is left to a system or to algorithms or machines to make. And so there is absolutely, absolutely critical decision making points for leaders in every sphere. And I would say, really, the onus is on us to not only learn the technology, but understand how to use it so that it produces the right impact that we desire versus negative impact.
Absolutely. Yes. I agree with you 100% on that because probably about a year and a half, I had a guest on who was talking about AI, and her approach was ethical AI, as she called it. And there's something you did say about, like in the case of you being in HR, that we do have to have human beings sitting on the table with the IT department or those who are in technology, because these systems are indeed designed and programmed by human beings. And so we need to ensure that whatever is going on, we call it behind the scenes, is ethical and it's not detrimental to the human race and to the organizations, because organizations are made up of people.
Absolutely.
So I commend you on saying, explaining that again, because the worry is there. I mean, most people are, or most people who are either in the employment sector or are looking to be employed, like the younger generation, people, students, they are a bit worried about these things. But as somebody said, people were worried about the internet. Uh,
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I think with every new technology, I break it down into what can I learn about it? How do I learn to use it in a way that quite honestly accelerates my impact as a leader?
mhm, mhm,
And everyone really needs to ask themselves that question because I'm using AI every day in personal life, on the job, in so many different ways. And it has absolutely, absolutely compounded my efficiency and speed in so many things I do. And so if you're not leveraging that, you will absolutely be outrun and outshone by individuals that are taking advantage of it to boost themselves. And then hand in hand with that, obviously, at a broader level, in terms of how organizations and systems are being set up, is the other point we spoke about in terms of the ethical usage and the governance. Ethical usage typically is going to require that there's also governance in place to ensure there are some checks and balances. But ultimately, I do believe it will be just like, as you said, the use of the internet, you know, 20 or so years ago, that was new and we had to get familiar with it. And now, 4-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds know how to get online and leverage the internet. And so we've got to embrace it, I think, is the underlining theme.
we have got to embrace it. Wow. So one last question before we round up here, because this is fascinating. I could talk with you forever
Absolutely.
about this. Yeah. But as someone who has built leaders, you've shaped cultures, you've led transformations, just as we were talking about how 20 years ago or 20, 25 years ago, the internet seemed like a threat. And
Mhm.
now 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds get on it in a nanosecond, you know.
Exactly. Exactly.
Ah, so what legacy and what impact would you like to leave
Hmm.
with the leaders now that you are influencing or you are walking alongside with?
Yeah. The topic of legacy is an important one, I think, that every leader should be concerned about. Because really, if you delve into the definition of leadership, it includes not just leading in the literal sense, but it is how you're developing others. It is how you are enabling others to fulfill, to maximize their potential, right? And so when I think about legacy, I think about it in the sense that it's the impact that my life can make as a result of my purpose on earth. And I, as well as any other individual that's concerned about legacy, is only able to leave a legacy when they understand their purpose. And so legacy and purpose in my mind go hand in hand. It's recognizing that each one of us has a destiny, has a purpose, has a specific assignment, so to speak, whether you want to say here on earth, whether you want to say in a specific role in the city you're living in, your family, you can define it in so many different dimensions. But I'm a firm believer that we do all have specific callings, so to speak, and assignments that we need to embrace and live into. And so when you think about that in the broader context of what legacy is, for me, I've dedicated my career to building strong leaders. And I am thrilled when I look back at individuals that perhaps I mentored, early in their career that are now operating in their own right as strong leaders in the corporate space, or even individuals I met who were already leaders put into some of those critical positions, high impact roles I spoke about earlier, but are finding themselves challenged and stretched beyond what they've ever been before because perhaps it's the biggest role they've been in or the most critical that they've ever been in. And having the privilege of being able to coach as an HR leader, coach and guide them in here are your strengths, here are the gaps, and here's how you need to fill those gaps. It brings me immense pleasure, and I'm absolutely fulfilled when I look back and see those individuals that embrace the challenge and were able to make that impact. I think that every leader has to ask themselves three fundamental questions. Where am I going that will make my life matter? That's purpose. What am I doing now that will make my life matter? That's intentional action. And who am I developing that will make my life live on? That's legacy. Because we often think about legacy as something that's tangible, especially when you think about in family estates and, a legacy of something that is handed over from family to family. And those are typically tangible. And if it's tangible, it also means that it can be lost, right? But I think of legacy beyond that in the sense of what you leave within others, because that is intangible. And that can be passed on from generation to generation, right? And so it's important to, number one, understand that you have a purpose, understand what that purpose is, be intentional about living it. And that's what enables one to leave a legacy.
I mean, this is so good. I would love to continue this conversation with you. We probably have do that, of course, with the members of the audience.
Yes,
But
yes, absolutely.
for those who are listening or viewing this online, how can they engage with you? Because this is such stimulating conversation. It needs to be continued.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would love to engage with the audience. I can be found on LinkedIn using my name. I can be found on Instagram, social media. All of my social media handles use my full name. And so easy to find me and would absolutely look forward to engaging in this dialogue further with the audience. I find that I also have a lot to learn from these discussions, and it's amazing some of the things that come out of these conversations.
Yes, I have such a respect for people who have the growth mindset because I say I learn something new every day. And when you learn something new, I mean, it sometimes it takes my breath away. But other times it's like building blocks. You learned this yesterday, and then next week you learn something else, and you can connect them and say, wow, this was just so
Absolutely.
good. And
Absolutely.
that's what I say about your conversation with me
Thank
today.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely.
And for those of you who are listening to this or viewing it on YouTube or wherever else you get your podcast, just like Maureen has been a guest on my show, reach out to me on my website if you'd like to be a guest. And my website is www.chattingwiththeexperts.com. I am on LinkedIn. You can look for Paul Oconee on my business page, which is Chatting with the Experts. On Instagram, my handle there is at chat_experts_podcast. And I'm on Facebook as Paula Okone. Even better still, on my business page, which is Chatting with the Experts. And last but not least, I'd love for you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Chatting with the Experts. There you'll be able to see so many other interviews I've done with amazing women who share my mission, just like Maureen, which is to educate, empower, and encourage women globally. So now we'll open up the floor to all those who joined us. And again, Maureen, thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you for the opportunity. I enjoyed our chat.